Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Trinadapi Sunichena Torat Iva Sahishnuna Omanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Hare Nama Hare Nama Hare Namaiva Kevalam Kalau Naskiva 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 Gatir Anyata Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Stri Shuddha Dvijabandhunang Trayina Shruti Gochara Karma Shreya Simudhanang Shreya Evang Bhavediha Iti Bharat Makayanang Kripaya Munina Kritam Out of compassion, the great sage Vyasadeva, who is very kind to the ignorant masses of people, thought it wise to edit the Vedas so they might be assimilated by less intellectual persons. This would enable them to achieve the ultimate goal of life. Thus he compiled the great historical narration called Mahäbhärata for women, laborers, and friends of the twice-born. Shri Shuka uvacha yada tu raja swasutana sudhun pushnano dharmena vinashta drishti bratur yavishtasya sutan vibandhun pravesha laksha bhavane dadaha. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, King Dhritarashtra became blind under the influence of impious desires to nourish his dishonest sons, and thus he set fire to the lacquer house to burn his fatherless nephews, the Pandavas. Yada sabhayang kurudeva devya kesha bimarshang sutakarma karyam navarayamasa nripa snushaya swaswai haratya kucha kun kumani. King Dhritarashtra did not forbid his son Dushashan his abominable action of grabbing the hair of Queen Draupadi, who was the wife of the godly king Yudhishthir, even though the tears of Draupadi washed the red dust on her breast. Dute twadharmena jitasya sadho satyavalambasya vanangatasya nayachato dat samayena dayang tamo jushano yadajata shatro. Yudhishthir, who was born without any enemy, was unfairly defeated in gambling. But because he had taken the vow of truthfulness, he went off to the forest. And when he came back, in due course, and begged the return of his rightful share of the kingdom, he was refused by Dhritarashtra, who was overwhelmed by illusion. Because the sons of Pandu were enraged by the numerous offenses of their enemies, such as duplicitous gambling, verbal insults, the seizing of Draupadi's hair, and many other cruel transgressions, the Supreme Lord enraged those Pandavas as the immediate cause to execute his will. On the pretext of the Battle of Kurukshetra, Lord Krishna arranged for all those kings who were burdening the earth to assemble with their armies on opposite sides of the battlefield, and when the Lord killed them through the agency of war, the earth was relieved of its burden. Mahäbhärata, Chapter 18, Part 1. Duryodhana embarrasses himself. Duryodhana had also decided to stay on for a while in Indraprastha with Shakuni. The prince burned from envy of the Pandavas' success. They had far exceeded him in their power and influence. Duryodhana could not stand the fact that Yudhishthir was now the emperor of the world, a position he felt should belong to him. He gazed with astonishment at the unlimited wealth piled in Yudhishthir's treasury. Duryodhana had never seen such opulence. Duryodhana was especially intrigued by the Mahäbhärata, and he wanted to take a closer look. Thus he and Shakuni examined the hall. Duryodhana saw celestial designs which he had never seen before anywhere else. He was amazed by the workmanship and splendor of the palace. It was as if he had gone to the heavenly planets. Bright gems sparkled on all sides of the spacious hall, and Duryodhana could feel a cool breeze which carried a mixture of celestial fragrances. Ivory and golden seats stood by the side of lotus-filled lakes. The walls were inlaid with exquisite carvings depicting the gods and their consorts. Duryodhana slowly made his way through the hall, his many golden ornaments jangling together as he walked. And as he saw the intricate and wonderful workmanship of Mahäbhärata, he became even more jealous. He snapped angrily at the palace servants walking in front of him. With his golden helmeted head held high, he walked casually, trying not to show any signs of being impressed. Gradually he came to the large crystal pond at the center of the palace. The water was perfectly clear and still. At first glance, it appeared to be a continuation of the marble floor leading up to it, and Duryodhana made that mistake. Fully clothed and with his eyes wide open, he fell straight into the water. The Pandavas were standing on a golden balcony above the pond. Seeing Duryodhana falling in with his arms and legs akimbo and bent outward, Bhima laughed aloud. Many of Krishna's queens were also present, and they too laughed. The Kaurava prince hauled himself out of the lake, helped by Shakuni. He did not even look at the Pandavas or Krishna or his queens. The queen's laughter was unbearable. Yudhishthira saw Duryodhana's embarrassment and told his brothers not to laugh. Krishna smiled but said nothing as Yudhishthira arranged for dry clothes to be brought and offered to the angry prince. Duryodhana quickly put them on and continued his tour, trying hard to conceal his feelings. Everything was intolerable to him. The magnificence of the palace, the incomparable beauty of the queens who moved about within it, and in particular Draupadi. Duryodhana was still burning from his failure to win that Panchala princess. Draupadi was a jewel among women, and she too had laughed when he had fallen into the lake. This was agony. Suddenly he again found himself a victim of the deceptive signs of the palace. He walked into an apparently open door, then avoided another because he thought it was closed when it was actually opened. The palace attendants were struggling to restrain their laughter. Humiliated and angry, the prince stormed out. Yudhishthira felt sorry to see Duryodhana's pain. He tried to console him in various ways, but Duryodhana just laughed. He bade the Pandavas farewell and left for Hastinapur, followed by his large retinue, his mind bent upon revenge. Duryodhana was bewildered in the palace constructed by Mahäbhärata, and thus he felt insulted. Part 2. Vyasadeva advises Yudhishthira. Then Krishna also decided to return home. As he was departing, he spoke affectionately to Yudhishthira. O king, cherish all of your subjects with ceaseless vigilance and patience. As the cloud is to all creatures, or as the large tree is to the birds, you should become the refuge of your dependents. After Krishna's departure, the Pandavas approached Vyasadeva, who had not yet left. Yudhishthira asked him if the sacrifice had been successful. The rishi replied, O Kuru child, this sacrifice will yield great results for 13 years. You shall be the undisputed emperor of this wide earth. But at the end of that period, you will be the cause of a war which will rid the world of all the Kshatriyas. Yudhishthira was alarmed. Seeing his expression, Vyasadeva said, Do not be aggrieved. No one can overcome the influence of time. Everything is arranged by the Supreme for the ultimate good of all. This war will be Duryodhana's fault, not yours. I shall now go to the mountains, but you will see me again in times of need. The rishi then stood up and left, surrounded by all the other sages. When they were gone, Yudhishthira spoke to his brothers. The sage's words cannot prove false, but I do not wish to be the cause of suffering in the world. From this day on, I shall not speak a harsh word to anyone. I will always practice virtue and shall see no difference between my own sons and those of others. And I shall follow my elders' commands without the least hesitation. In this way, I shall avoid disagreements, for disagreements are the cause of war. Yudhishthira continued to think about Vyasadeva's words. It seemed that the Lord's plan was unfolding. Although the Pandavas had asserted their rulership over the world, it was still a fact that many impious kings were exploiting the earth's resources. Yudhishthira saw at the sacrifice that there were many who had supported Shishupal against Krishna. Although they were afraid to oppose him openly, who knew what evil schemes Duryodhana and his brothers would dream up next? All of this was no doubt Krishna's arrangement to rid the world of ungodly elements. Yudhishthira remained immersed in thought of Krishna and in Krishna's mysterious plans. Part 3. Shakuni comforts Duryodhana. As he made his way back to Hastinapur, Duryodhana sat brooding and miserable in his chariot. Shakuni asked, "What ails you, O king? Why are you sighing again and again?" The prince looked distractedly at Shakuni. "Oh, uncle, I am filled with jealousy to see the world under the sway of the Pandavas. Having witnessed their astounding sacrifice and seeing them shining like gods in heaven, my heart burns day and night. Indeed, I am drying up like a shallow pool in the summer sun." Duryodhana gazed out of his chariot at the rolling countryside with its well-tilled fields and blossoming orchards. Groups of villagers stood and watched as the royal procession moved along the road. The prince continued. When Krishna killed Shishupal, no one dared to speak, none of the kings. They were all awed by the Pandavas' might. How else could they have tolerated such an injustice? Duryodhana wrung his hands. I cannot tolerate it. I shall therefore enter fire. I shall drown myself or swallow poison. What man who possesses any prowess at all can bear to see his enemies prosper? How can I ever equal the Pandavas' power and opulence? Who can help me achieve such influence? Indeed, fate is supreme, and the exertion of man is useless. All my efforts to destroy the Pandavas have failed. Instead, they flourish like lotuses in a lake. Therefore, I should die now. Know for certain that I am in the grip of grief, O uncle. Go. Please inform my father. Shakuni moved closer to his nephew. O Duryodhana, do not envy the Pandavas. They are receiving what is rightfully theirs due to their own deeds. They have their half of the kingdom, and with Krishna's help and Drupada's alliance, they have grown rich. What is there to be sorry about? The Gandhara ruler Shakuni smiled as he spoke. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he fingered his jeweled rings. Your cousins have conquered the world and now possess limitless wealth. Why do you grieve? This wealth can now become yours. You said there are no one to help you, but I do not agree. You have 100 brothers. You have the greatly powerful Drona, Karna, and the invincible chariot warrior Kripa. And also my brothers, along with the mighty Somadat, we all stand ready at your command. Take the earth and rule it without any rival. Duryodhana's eyes widened. He sat up straight on the leather-upholstered seat. Perhaps his uncle was right. The core of his strength was hard to rival. Drona, Bhishma, Kripa, Karna, who could face these men when they stood together in battle? Duryodhana spoke eagerly. O king, if you think it wise, then I shall conquer the Pandavas. This whole world shall be mine, along with the magnificent Maya Sabha. Shakuni slowly shook his head. He played with a set of dice which he carried with him everywhere. Do not be rash, O king. There are many ways to overcome an enemy apart from battle. We cannot conquer in battle the Pandavas, especially when they are united with Krishna. Why not even Indra, with all the celestials, could overpower the Pandavas? I was thinking of another way by which they can be defeated. Shakuni suggested that they challenge Yudhisthira to a game of dice. He knew Yudhisthira was fond of playing, and he also knew that Yudhisthira was not so expert. But at dice, Shakuni had no equal anywhere in the world. Without a doubt, Yudhisthira will accept your challenge, Shakuni continued, while his arm rested on Duryodhana's shoulder. he cannot resist the game, and but with a little encouragement, he will surely gamble away all his possessions. In this way, I will win for you his entire kingdom and wealth. Part 4. Dhritarashtra hears from Vidura about the gambling match. As they entered Hastinapur, Duryodhana suggested that they go at once to Dhritarashtra and get his permission for the plan. Arriving before the blind king, Shakuni said, "O great monarch, here is your son Duryodhana. He is pale and emaciated with grief. You should ask him the cause and try to find a remedy." Dhritarashtra was surprised. "Why are you sad, my son? You have at your disposal everything enjoyable, no less than the gods. Vast wealth, the best of clothes, the finest food, beautiful women, all these await your pleasure. How then have you become depressed?" Duryodhana at once admitted that he was consumed by jealousy of the Pandavas. Even though he had wealth, their wealth, his enemies' wealth, was superior. The Kaurava then described to his father what he had seen at Indraprastha. During the sacrifice, Yudhishthira was given so much tribute that it became necessary to turn some of it away. He had been offered millions of elephants, horses, cows, and camels. Heaps of gems and golden ornaments were stacked up like mountains. The Pandava provided 30 servant maids for each of the 88,000 Brahmins. He arranged to feed 100,000 Brahmins at the time during the sacrifice. And when they were fed, conches were blown. "Oh, Father, I heard those conches sounding all throughout the sacrifice." Duryodhana told the king how he had even seen the demigods at the sacrifice. Samudra, the ocean deity, had personally offered Yudhishthira celestial ambrosia drawn from the depths of the sea. This beverage is superior even to the somaras that Indra enjoys. It was impossible for Duryodhana to describe to his blind father all that he had seen. And as he remembered it, Duryodhana's heart burned with the fire of envy. Dhritarashtra remained silent, and then Shakuni spoke. "O king, I know a means by which your son may win all this wealth for himself. I propose that you invite Yudhishthira to a game of dice. No one can defeat me at dice. I will easily win. In this way, we shall acquire all that Yudhishthira possesses." Then Duryodhana said, "Father, please grant us your permission to carry this out. Let us conquer our enemies and enjoy this earth." Dhritarashtra was uncertain. "Let me consult the wise Vidura. He will only advise us for our own good." "Vidura will certainly block our plan," Duryodhana replied. "And if he does, then I shall take my own life. Then you and Vidura may live here happily. What need do you have for me anyway?" Dhritarashtra was pained. Duryodhana was his most dear son. How could he ever refuse his requests? The king decided he would talk with Vidura and convince him. Dhritarashtra then ordered that a palatial hall be constructed for the gambling match. It should have 1,000 pillars and 1,000 gates. Covering 2 square miles, it should be set with countless gems. When it was complete, they could invite the Pandavas for the game. Dhritarashtra was still uneasy. He knew the evils of gambling. He called for Vidura and said, "I have decided to invite the Pandavas for a friendly game of dice with my sons. They can gamble a little and thus sport together. I am building a fine hall for their pleasure." Vidura frowned. "I do not approve of this, O king. Gambling always brings with it dispute and fighting. You should be careful that no dissension arises between your sons and the Pandavas, for that may cause destruction." Dhritarashtra tried to reassure his brother. "When you, me, Bhishma, and Drona are there, what evil could befall us? In any event, destiny is supreme. Whatever has been ordained by the supreme power will surely come to pass. What can our meager efforts do to avert it? I have already arranged for this gambling match for my son's pleasure. Please, do not try to change my mind." Vidura sighed. "Fate is surely all-powerful, O king, but we nevertheless receive the results of our own deeds. We always have free will. The supreme power simply reciprocates with our own desires. It is the consequences of our acts, the consequences of our decisions, which are inevitable, not the acts themselves. O Lord, consider carefully your motivation in allowing this gambling match." Dhritarashtra remained silent, and Vidura slowly left his chamber with a heavy heart. Vidura could understand that Kali Yuga, the dark age of quarrel and suffering, was beginning. The gambling match would certainly set in motion the events that would lead to the annihilation of the world's rulers. Vidura remembered the Rajasuya and the kings who had supported Shishupal against Krishna. Vidura was apprehensive, but he felt helpless. Although the king, his brother, was not a fool, Dhritarashtra was controlled by his covetous and mean-minded son. Vidura's counsel, although aimed at the good of all, was but falling on deaf ears. Part 5. Dhritarashtra reluctantly acquiesces to Duryodhana. During the coming weeks, as the hall was being built, Dhritarashtra reflected on Vidura's words. He disliked countermanding his brother's advice, because he knew Vidura never gave faulty counsel. The impending dice match was undoubtedly fraught with danger. If it led to a battle between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, well, that would be a disaster. The king decided to try once more to change his son's mind. Sitting alone with Duryodhana in his chamber, Dhritarashtra said, "O son of Gandhari, there is no need to gamble with your cousins. Vidura does not approve of it, and I also do not like it. Gambling inevitably leads to dissension. Why, everything we now have could be all ruined. If you desire wealth equal to that of the Pandavas, then let us perform a sacrifice similar to theirs. Then all the kings of the world will bring you tribute as they did to Yudhishthir. Why must you take Yudhishthir's wealth from him? Yudhishthir is gentle. He will never attack you or cause you pain. My son, give up your envy and do not grieve. Instead, enjoy life with all the good things you already possess." Duryodhana would not accept his father's advice. He then told him about the incidents in the Mahäbhärata, how the Pandavas, and especially Draupadi, had laughed at him. As he remembered it again, his anger became inflamed. In a choked voice, he described the incidents to his father. "Seeing what I thought to be a door, but which was really a solid piece of crystal, I walked straight into it and I smashed my head. There, as I stood with my brain swimming, the twins Nakul and Sahadev came up and supported me. Sahadev led me by the hand, smiling and saying repeatedly, 'This is the door, O king.' I felt like dying right then and there." The Kaurava prince gave more details about the Pandavas' wealth. The Kauravas could never equal that wealth, even if they performed 100 sacrifices. Duryodhana had never even heard of the many shining gems he had seen at Yudhishthir's palace. For weeks, an endless line of kings and chieftains arrived at Indraprastha, each bringing huge amounts of tribute in an attempt to excel the others in charity. Seeing all the gold, gems, weapons, animals, clothes, rugs, silk, skins, serving maids, perfumes, and incenses, Duryodhana was shocked. When he saw Samudra fetch Varuna's massive golden conch, which Krishna then used to bathe Yudhishthir in the final sacrificial ablution, the Kaurava prince all but lost his mind and senses. Dhritarashtra listened in silence as his son continued. "O father, the Pandavas have even spread their dominion to the far regions north, such as Harivasha, which no man can go. The residents of that land gave them hundreds of celestial conch shells, and I heard them being blown during the sacrifice. The tremendous sound made my hair stand erect. Weaker kings fainted upon hearing the noise." Duryodhana's voice became increasingly urgent as he pleaded with his father. "I cannot live as long as the Pandavas possess such incomparable opulence. If they are allowed to flourish, it will only be a matter of time until they overpower us, the Kauravas. The Pandavas are our enemies. It is only right that we should attack them and take their wealth. This is the Kshatriya code. Either I will gain control of the earth, or I will die. This gambling match is the safest and surest way to achieve my ends. Dhritarashtra thought for some moments, and then he replied, "Oh, son, my son, I hate such enmity, especially when you bear it towards those who are powerful. Such hostility brings about a change of feelings, and thus itself is a painful weapon, even though not made of steel. Do you realize that what you are suggesting will certainly cause a fearful war?" Duryodhana paced impatiently in front of his blind father. What violence is there in a simple game of dice? If Yudhishthir chooses to gamble and he loses his wealth, then how can anyone blame us? We have nothing to lose. Shakuni will win every game. Oh, Father, please grant me permission to invite the Pandavas for this match. The king rose from his seat and called for his servants. As they led him away, Dhritarashtra said, "Your words do not find favor with me, O prince. But do what you will. But you will surely repent your rashness later, for deeds fraught with impiety never bring prosperity. I shall ask Vidura to invite the Pandavas." Part 6. Vidura tries one last time. A few days later, the king heard that the hall had been completed. He called for Vidura and said, "Please leave at once for Indraprastha and bring Yudhishthir and his brothers. Invite them for a friendly game of dice with their cousins in our new hall." Vidura tried one last time to dissuade the king to change his mind. "This match will bring about the destruction of our whole race. Clearly your son wants only the wealth of the Pandavas and has contrived this means to take it. Dissension among our family members will cause our ruin. O king, stop it now while you have the chance." But Dhritarashtra had already made up his mind. "Oh, brother, everything lies in the hands of destiny. If destiny so wills it, then we will not be harmed. And if by the course of fate we are to suffer, then what can be done? Everything happens according to providence. Therefore, please go to Indraprastha and return with Kunti's invincible sons." Vidura looked despairingly at the blind monarch, his brother. It was hopeless to try to change his mind. His attachment for Duryodhana was too strong. Even though he could obviously see the results of acquiescing to his own son, Dhritarashtra still did not refuse him. Fearing the worst, Vidura left the palace and prepared for his journey. So that ends chapter 18 of the Mahäbhärata. I'd like to do one more section. In the first part, we read about how Duryodhana became bewildered and embarrassed in the Maya Sabha. This same pastime is described by Srila Prabhupada in Krishna Book, chapter 75. Therefore, I would like to read that portion as an addendum to this class. From Krishna Book, this is called Duryodhana Fried. When Duryodhana saw that Maharaj Yudhishthira had become very famous after performing the Rajasuya Yajna and was fully satisfied in every respect, Duryodhana began to burn with the fire of envy because his mind was always poisonous. For one thing, he envied the imperial palace constructed by the demon Maya for the pleasure of the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship, and it was befitting the position of great princes, kings, or leaders of the demons even. In that great palace, the Pandavas lived with their family members and with Queen Draupadi, who served her husbands very peacefully. And because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by his thousands of queens. When the queens with their heavy breasts and thin waists moved within the palace, and their ankle bells rang very melodiously, and with their movement the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdom. And because a portion of their breasts was sprinkled with saffron powder, the pearl necklaces on their breasts appeared reddish. With their beautiful earrings and flowing hair, the queens appeared very attractive. After looking at such beauties in the palace of King Yudhishthira, Duryodhana was simply envious. He was especially envious and lustful upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi, because he had cherished a special attraction for her from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present, and along with the other princes. He had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but he had failed to achieve her. Once upon a time, King Yudhishthira was sitting on the golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His 4 brothers and other relatives, as well as his great well-wisher Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were present, and the material opulence of King Yudhishthira seemed no less than that of Lord Brahma. When Yudhishthira was sitting on the throne, surrounded by his friends, and the reciters were offering him prayers in the form of nice songs, Duryodhana came to the palace with his younger brothers. Duryodhana was decorated with a helmet, and he carried a sword in his hand. He was always in an envious and angry mood, and therefore on slight provocation he spoke sharply with the doorkeepers and became angry. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the tricks would consider water to be land and land to be water. Duryodhana was also illusioned by this craftsmanship, and when he crossed water, thinking it to be land, he fell down. When Duryodhana, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. King Yudhishthira could understand the feelings of Duryodhana, and so he tried to restrain the queens. But Lord Krishna indicated that King Yudhishthira should not restrain the queens from enjoying the incident. Krishna desired that Duryodhana be fooled in that way, and that all of them enjoy his foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhana felt insulted, and his bodily hairs stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, he immediately left the palace, bowing his head. He was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhana left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident, and King Yudhishthira also was very sorry. But despite all these occurrences, Krishna remained silent. He did not say anything against or anything in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhana had been put into illusion by the supreme will of Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the final enmity between the two sects of the Kuru dynasty. This appeared to be a part of Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. King Parikshit had inquired from Shukadeva Goswami why Duryodhana was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Shukadeva Goswami. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purports of the 75th chapter of the book known as Krishna, chapter entitled Why Duryodhana Felt Insulted at the End of the Rajasuya Sacrifice. So I will end this by singing one of my songs. Never felt like this before I chanted. How did I exist before I chanted? Now you're on my mind. You're there all the time. I can't forget that you're inside my heart, inside my heart. Oh my Lord, I simply must surrender. Oh my Lord, I really must surrender. Oh my Lord, I truly must surrender to you, to you. Things have really changed since I've been chanting. since I've been chanting. You've got a way about you. Now I can't live without you. I can't forget that you're inside my heart. Inside my heart. Oh my Lord, I simply must surrender. Oh my Lord, I really must surrender. Oh my Lord, I truly must surrender to you, to you. So let me go on chanting for 1,000,000 years. I won't forget that you're inside my heart. Inside my heart. Oh my Lord, I simply must surrender. Oh my Lord, I really must surrender. Oh my Lord, I truly must surrender to you, to you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.